Welcome to the HMO Property Show, by investors for investors. Brought to you by the HMO Property Co, Australia's leaders in impact investing. Investments made with the intention to generate a measurable, beneficial social or environmental impact alongside a positive financial return. Catch us weekly as we discuss all things cash flow positive property investing.
Welcome back to the HMO Property Show. I'm your host, Neil Gibb, and today I brought in another very special guest who's got experience in Perth, America, built to rent, multi-family apartment buildings, like you name it, she's done it. Justine Roberts, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Neil. Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you again. It's been almost 12 months,
It has, yeah. I think it has been at least 12 months.
And then we went through a phase where we've seen each other just about every week at one point, I think.
That's right. Yeah, it's been too long.
It has. Justine, you've been in property for quite a while now, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Over 20 years, I'm ashamed to admit.
And just before we pressed record, you said you love the smell of concrete and you love construction. I love it. That's why we're friends.
Yeah, I do. I grew up playing on construction sites, and I just love the smell of concrete. Like still, I go into, when it's under construction and you walk into a stairwell, it just smells like concrete. Love it.
Fresh paint?
Fresh paint, concrete. Just the sound of hammers. It's awesome.
So you actually grew up playing on construction sites?
Yeah, I mean, I did, full credit to my mum. She was always there watching me. But, we grew up on kind of the fringe of suburbia, and there were lots of houses under construction. So as a little girl, I used to love walking through them and imagining what kind of families would live there and, how the home would live and what memories would be made there. And I don't know why, but I just always loved residential development. So, and I was decent at art at school, and my dad pushed me into architecture. And so I got a couple of degrees, design degrees, one in architecture, one in environmental design, and then just really wanted to get buildings built and got super frustrated as an architect with people not really knowing how to finance or get buildings approved. So I became a developer with that goal to just smell some more concrete.
So that's how you got into it. You're actually an architect.
Yeah, I am. Wicked. Yeah. Well, I have a degree in architecture with honours. Thank you very much. But yeah, just became a developer trying to solve those problems almost by default, because I just love buildings.
And do you feel like you've solved some of them problems? Solved
enough of those problems. I could always solve more. Yeah, nothing better than the sense of teamwork of bringing a big project to light. That's what I get a huge kick out of.
Teamwork makes the dream work, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can't do them on your own,
True. Very true. So when you transitioned out of architecture into property development, how did that come about?
I took a job I figured out that I needed to learn how to get buildings approved, because I could see that a lot of architects had some challenges with that. And so I took a job with a planning company and did a lot of work learning how to get projects approved through the southwest of WA, and then moved to Sydney and took a job with Winton Property. And they're a family company owned by Gary Rothwell, very sophisticated developers. Gary had an amazing sense of style and quality and design. He was an architect by background, and he'd been super successful in apartment development. And he was doing a lot of land development. So I worked for him as an urban designer, and he really gave me free rein just to essentially teach myself land development across about 4 projects up and down the New South Wales coast. Yeah. So it was a bit of a baptism by fire. And I remember I had pictures up on my office of all the different excavators and front end loaders, because I didn't know their names. And so I had to teach myself. And I used to get a lot done with a box of ice creams for excavator drivers on a Friday afternoon. Yeah. Nice. And that's how I got into it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. And then you were the general manager for Webb Brown and Neves as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Prior to that, I spent about 5 years on the Ellenbrook development project, leading that, which was incredible with LWP, major team effort on that with some fantastic consultants. And then I was general manager of Webb and Brown Neves, which is a high-end sort of medium to high volume home building company with, at the time, a staff of about 110 people. And
solid reputation in Perth as well.
34-year-old company led by Gary Brown-Neves, who's just a legend of WA home building and generally just a lovely guy too. And, so I learnt a lot about running a building company and again, just residential, and this time, for individual families, which was, went from working on very large things to homes, which are quite small and detailed and really important to their clients. So that was a great deal of fun.
And you've got to really tune in on them skills as well. When you said that you used to visualise how someone would live in a house, I'm guessing like in a building company you get to see that all the time, how people are going to live and function and spend time in different areas of a house. I think you just have to, I like to just think about the end user in every, I'm kind of typology agnostic as long as it's to do with residential development. I guess that's my specialty. But you do have to, I think you get a better result if you think about who's going to live in there, and you try and create the project from their perspective of how it's going to live. And that can apply to everything from crisis accommodation through to, social housing, affordable housing, build to rent, up to sort of $5 million homes or apartments. It's the same thing, what's it going to be like to live here? And it's actually one of the habits of the 7 habits of highly effective people, isn't it? Start with the end in mind. So there you go. Okay. It is, Great book.
Doing something right. I think I have read that years ago.
One of my favourite books. And then in 2013, you actually went over to America for a while, didn't you?
I did, I went to San Francisco, California, and I landed a job with Carmel Partners, who are just a powerhouse multifamily developer headquartered in San Francisco, but national, and with a very large amount of multifamily or build-to-rent apartments under their ownership and management. So they were nationwide in the States, and I didn't know a thing about multifamily when I started working for them, but I really, really liked their CEO, Ron Zeff, who's a bit of a legend. I didn't know it at the time. I just thought he was a nice guy.
You've worked for a few legends.
I've been lucky, or strategic. I don't know which. But I've always, you want to learn from the best, don't you, when you can.
100%.
Yeah. So Ron was incredible, and all that Carmel Partners did was multifamily development, and they had some very highly respected investors and just generally very highly respected in the US multifamily development scene. And so I was Vice President of Development Execution for them, and during the time that I was with them, we built about 2,000 multifamily apartments across 5.
Just a small job then.
Just rolled a few out. Across 5 projects. So I was up and down from Los Angeles, had projects in Los Angeles, San Francisco Bay Area, and also Seattle, Washington. So a lot of time in a plane, and just a really just incredible group of people in that organisation, just the best of the best. I don't know what the heck I was doing there, but there was some very, very smart individuals like Dan Garibaldi and Kim Hoaxema, and just really knew what they were doing. And
do they do anything different in America to what we do in Australia in the development side of things, apart from multifamily, which we will get into in a second?
I look a lot of alternative construction methodologies, I'd say. Okay. So, in the projects that I worked on, we had everything from high-rise steel and glass down to quite a lot of work in timber frame construction. Okay. So I learned a lot about wood framing and the efficiencies that can come with lightweight construction and how that can be applied to sort of medium-rise apartment building. And I think just, that's on the construction development side, and their rigour with regard to feasibility analysis over there is just first rate. I was working with Wall Street investment bankers doing the feasibility. And I learned a thing or two from that caliber of individual. Yeah, some amazing financial minds there. But the company, you know, was as focused on financial metrics as it was on the quality of the outcome, and that's a big thing for me. Is a quality development. Yeah, and I think like the other thing I really saw there just in development was just the approach to pets as well in residential development. You know, like pets are really welcomed and are seen as a hurdle to living in apartments. And in Australia, we sort of make it really hard for people to have a pet in an apartment. But in the US, you know, it was about designing the building so it could accept pets and fostering pets as part of life because they're so important for well-being. And they, you know, people are happy when they've got their pets and they want to stay living where they are. And it just creates a really sticky apartment environment because everybody's happy and they connect through their pets. Like we used to hold yappy hours, you know, where we'd have like purpose-built pet exercise areas on rooftops of buildings, and the community manager at 5 o'clock would, you know, have, you know, bring your dog and a glass of wine and meet your neighbours. And
brilliant.
Like, yeah, and it was
community-led,
yes. But very smart financially because it stopped people leaving the development and therefore reduced the operating costs associated with turning an apartment and increased net profit year on year because you weren't suffering the costs of vacating an apartment on the balance sheet.
Yeah.
On the operating income, I should say, not the balance sheet.
So when you're saying they accommodate pets, what do they do differently over there to accommodate a pet that we don't do in Australia?
I mean, like as I said, you know, almost every project I worked on, we designed a pet exercise area, even in high-rise and especially in high-rise. So like up on the podium, there'd be like a fully kitted outdoor pet exercise area with doggy tunnels and, you know, doggy play equipment. We'd have like barbecues and bench seats and a doggy wash and, you know, so that if you're going to have a pet and let's say you work shift work or you're a young woman perhaps living in an apartment development in an area that, you know, it doesn't matter where you live, it's really not safe to take your pet out at 10 o'clock at night to give your pet relief. So having that ability to do that in a secure environment within the buildings, like something that you need to think about if you're going to invite pets into an apartment development. So there's that. And just also, you know, one community manager I worked with, Leslie, who's just an absolute legend of community management, she used to have in her office a photo of everybody's pet. And she knew, not only did she know the person's name in the, you know, 150 odd units, she knew their dog's name and like which treat Fido liked. And she actually, you know, created this place by connecting with people's pets. So it came right down to the operating side as well. But then also I'd just say like the just general approach to customer service and treating people who lived within the development as residents and the most highly valued asset within the development and just making sure that those customers or residents were just really well taken care of. I don't see that so much yet in Western Australian property management, for example, as much as I think we should have.
Yeah.
You know,
do you think the property managers try to represent the client too much or the investor more than the actual tenant who's paying the rent?
Yeah, I do. And I think that's primarily because of, you know, the majority of rental property here is through mum and dad investors and rather than a professionally managed approach. So it's understandable. Yeah. But I think that's one of the advantages of going for multifamily or build to rent is that you do get that resident focused approach as a tenant, which is a good thing.
Now you touched on multifamily a few times there. What is the difference between multifamily and build to rent?
Multifamily and build to rent are the same thing. Yeah. Build to rent is the Australian version of the word, and multifamily is what it's referred to in America.
Yep.
And I can. Well, I guess should I explain which is what it is?
Yeah, please. Yeah. Because there'll be people that are listening that might not know.
Yeah, sure. Look, multifamily or build to rent. So I'll call it build to rent because we're in Australia here. It is essentially, in its purest form, it is an apartment development that is of scale and looks very much like a for sale apartment development. It's a highly amenitized development. So there'll be resort style amenities, swimming pools, saunas, whatever makes sense for that submarket, but great amenities. And the development is, in its purest form, 100% for rent. So every apartment in that development is for rent, and it is professionally managed. So there is someone within the building in a front desk environment that is managing the day-to-day operation of the project in a similar way to you might have a front desk team for a hotel.
Yeah.
And so that's its purest form. It can, build to rent can exist in a mixed use environment too, where there's some for sale and some for rent. And I've done projects like that too. But yeah, primarily that's the difference. It's a professionally managed 100% for rent apartment development, which puts the resident first.
Brilliant. Awesome. And from the developer's point of view, how do they profit from a build to rent? Because at the normal build to sell, there's obviously an exit strategy where they can cash in and then use that capital to go elsewhere.
Yeah.
Is that possible with build to rent?
Yeah, look, there are exit strategies for sure, and I'll talk about those in a moment. But I guess fundamentally the two investment profiles are different between for sale and for rent, and the capital profile is different. So capital that wants to invest in build to rent understands that it is lower risk, lower return, longer term hold. So the idea is that the build to rent asset is held for somewhere between 8 and 20 years, depending on the quality or the position of the asset. But generally it's a long-term hold play, and it's perpetually for rent. So you're getting that long-term annuity of the rent year on year on year, which can be escalated year on year on year.
Yep.
And it's operated in a professional way, and it's an operating asset, if you will, as well. In terms of an exit strategy, I have worked on projects where we can, and I do this both in Australia and the US, where we consider for our investors, and it's a good move to look at if we were to put a strata map over the project and convert it to for sale in the event that the investors require that flexibility. We think about that right up front in the design of the project. So we think about how it might be exited right at the beginning, and we design it and structure it accordingly. But the goal is sort of build to rent first with a for sale exit. So if we look at the two capital profiles, build to rent passive, lower risk, longer term hold. For sale is money in, money out, highest return possible, get out, and it's and they're both super important segments of the market. Not one is better than the other, but on build to rent, there's a higher vested interest in the long term quality of the project because you're owning it for a really long time. So you're having that long-term view in the way that you design and deliver and construct the building.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and there's some subtle differences, yeah.
And with the financing side of things as well, with a build for sale, we have to get X amount of pre-sales. How does build to rent differ in the way from a financing point of view? Yeah,
so, as you're quite right, like for a for sale, you do need to get over a certain pre-sale hurdle in order to get your construction finance.
Yep.
On build to rent, because you're not selling that, you're essentially renting and holding. It's a pro and con. You don't have to get your pre-sales, but you do have to, as an investor group, have sufficient capital in order to secure construction finance.
Right.
So it's equity heavy, and therefore it attracts a different investor profile. Yeah, so super funds, I'm seeing a lot of interest. It certainly suits their investment profile and the needs of their investors. High net worth families or syndications of high net worth families. It's a wonderful high net worth family investment because it's very difficult to divest in and it protects intergenerational wealth because of that.
Yeah.
You know, it's a longer term asset, so essentially it sanctions the wealth for quite some time,
Yep.
and the next generation can essentially get the benefit of receiving rent and an ongoing annuity from the project. So it's less attractive to divest, which can be great for high net worth families who want to see that wealth continue over time.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And obviously this has been huge in America for quite a while now, hasn't it? Has it been happening in Perth and we just haven't been aware of it? Because it seems to be a bit of a buzzword at the minute, like everything seems to be built to rent at the minute.
Yeah,
Seen a lot of it.
It's definitely gaining momentum. I think it's an untapped market segment, and I think smart investors can see that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm working across a number of projects in Perth and Australia, and around Australia, I should say. So they're definitely there. So, for example, there's EG's development in Leederville on Frame Court, which is an incredible 2-tower development, 1 tower for sale, 1 tower build to rent,
Right.
with amenities shared across a podium. Great team there with CCN Architects and Hatch Roberts Day and Realm Landscape, and a wonderful client, really great client. It's so, as we know, great projects are the result of great clients, aren't they?
And that one was in Leederville.
Leederville, yeah.
Nice.
So that's moving along there. I've worked with Fraser's Property Group on their build-to-rent project Brunswick and Co. in Fortitude Valley in Queensland, which was part of a pilot that the Queensland State Government have done with Fraser's, which is, again, just another beautiful development, which is a significant high-rise project there. Currently working with Development WA, so the government's taking an interest in build-to-rent, and we're looking at a project in the CBD on Pier Street in Perth, and that's super interesting because it combines market rate build to rent as well as social and affordable housing, which is another passion of mine. So it's got a whole, that project, if we're successful, will combine a couple of segments of the housing continuum, which is fantastic. And then, I've got worked on a large master plan build-to-rent project of sort of 400 units or more in Joondalup. So they're around, and then I have some that I work on myself privately with investors. So, it's definitely coming along.
Yeah.
We've seen some US operators, build-to-rent operators, come into Australia on the East Coast primarily.
Yep.
And I certainly I have a lot of conversations about it, given, there's so much demand. We're looking at record low vacancy rates in rental accommodation here in Perth. It's bubbling around at like 1%. The demand is there already, but as Australia's borders open up to the rest of the world, there's some 25,000 visa holders approved sitting out there wanting to move to WA. I mean, where are they going to live?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Who do we bring? Do we bring the builders to build the houses for the people that need to live in them, or do we bring the people for the infrastructure, the teachers, the doctors, the nurses?
It's a great question. Yeah, and I think that's something that it's industry bodies are working on. I think there's a balance there for sure, because, we've got supply chain issues and construction delays, in Western Australia.
Don't we know it?
Don't we know it? Yeah. So, so that demand is just there. And I think, renting on the private market here in Australia is just such a miserable experience for renters. Like, can't bring your dog. You can't hang your curtains so your baby can sleep. You're not allowed to paint a wall. It's
difficult, eh?
Yeah, and you can be kicked out at any moment. There's no security of tenure. So I think on that, there's a
huge opportunity.
There's a huge opportunity, and there's like physical demand, there's like statistical demand, but then I think from an emotional perspective and a market-led perspective, like people just want a better way to rent. And a professionally managed approach is just you've got security of tenure. You're not going to be kicked out at any moment. And there's someone running the development who knows what they're doing and is invested in you as a resident.
Yeah.
So I think there's a groundswell on the demand side. as well as this huge financial opportunity on the investor side.
So with the build to rent, people that live there can paint the house, they can hang curtains, they can do whatever they need to do.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's, typically there's maintenance crew on site. So if the dishwasher breaks within 24 hours,
Get them in.
there's a new dishwasher, or the dishwasher's fixed. If you want to paint a wall, paint a wall. If you want to hang pictures, hang them. Like the whole approach is we want our residents to be happy and comfortable and enjoy where they're living and personalise it and make it their own, so they stay on with us. It's flipping that.
I'm starting to see the benefit of it now as well.
Yeah. Look, I've lived, when I've done a lot of build-to-rent development, I've managed existing build-to-rent assets in the States. I've also lived in a build-to-rent development, so I understand it from a resident's perspective. And then I've rented on the private market when I moved back to Australia, and it's just night and day. It's miserable. I had to. Yeah, as we all do when we rent. I think we just pretend in Australia that people don't rent, It's like, well, they do. A lot of people rent at many times of their life, and why can't that experience be better?
Yeah, exactly. Before we get onto social and affordable housing, because you just touched on it there as well, can we talk about Elizabeth Quays?
Yeah.
Because you're involved in the development of some of the lots there. Is that right?
Yeah, so when I moved back from the States, I was the lead developer on lots 5 and 6, Elizabeth Quays, which is Brookfield development, very complex project, and quite significantly mixed-use high-rise project. So it included a portion of retail, several floors of office, a 90-key boutique high-end hotel, and then 250-odd apartments, so all in a vertical stack with some basement parking thrown in for good measure, and then a separate standalone retail and office building.
Beautiful.
So large project, really, beautiful project, and it was a joint venture on the design side with a US architect and a fantastic architect here in Perth. So great experience, great way to come home to Perth when I came back. Yeah, welcome back. And just lovely to work with the team at Brookfield on that. But, build to rent is my passion, and that's, when I started my company, that's where the focus of my efforts has been, in build to rent.
Sounds like it's going well.
Yeah.
You're a busy person as well, aren't you? So you're also a board member of UDIA.
Yeah, I'm on it's a council. Yeah, there's the equivalent of a board so that's the Urban Development Institute of Australia, the WA branch.
Yep. And then we've got RUA as well.
Yeah, RUA is just this beautiful organisation, incredibly well run, and it focuses in 3 areas of society that need the most work, really, and one is helping women and their children escape domestic violence and recover, mental health and homelessness. So they're just doing some phenomenal work there at RUA, and it's an absolute honour to be involved in their organisation. We're also, through RUA, doing a large new development project, the RUA Centre for Women and Children, which is in Northbridge. It's a $28 million building. It's incredibly elegant and beautiful. It includes a couple of floors of crisis accommodation, health services and legal services with the goal of helping to end domestic violence. So that's something that I'm super passionate about, and I encourage everyone to have a look at what RUA does for society.
Yep.
And then the other one is the Sienna Wood joint venture. So I'm chair of Sienna Wood joint venture, which is a wonderful development, which is a joint venture, master plan community development, joint venture between Development WA and Stockland. So
super busy.
Yes, yeah. I try to be, but as I said, I just love development. I can't help myself.
So what are the plans over the next? Where do you see Perth going over the next 10 years in the way of demand for housing? Because historically, it's been boom and bust, and we've seen peaks and troughs. We deal with a lot of investors from the East Coast, and they still believe that it's going to be a sort of peak and trough town. Where do you see it being in the next 10 years?
Oh, look, I just think there is a critical underlying demand on all aspects of the housing continuum that can't be addressed in the next 10 years. It just won't. So that, we've been underbuilding social and affordable housing for quite some time. I know the WA state government's doing a lot to address that at the moment, but there is just huge underlying demand for housing. And we are a bit like San Francisco, depends heavily on tech for its economy. West Australia depends heavily on mining and resources for its economy. However, people need houses, don't they? And that's not going to stop. And as I said, with this huge demand sitting there and then increased demand as we open up our borders, I think we've got, at the moment, we've got challenges with construction costs. And delays associated with lack of trades, and that's forcing our prices up, which is very challenging for developers and also for our friends in the construction industry. Yep. Really hard to manage.
And the end consumer.
And the consumer, waiting longer for their project. And also we've got massive supply chain issues associated with, we've had a boom cycle here in WA. We're continuing to have that, and the delays on some of the resources required to build are significant. So there's quite a lot of pressure on projects at the moment. But I do see strong underlying demand, and that just can't be ignored.
I think for years as well, the Perth market has been driven by a mining boom. I think the last one we had was when Chevron started them big projects, Gorgon and Wheatstone, and Impex started, and we had all these people coming in. But this oversupply of property that we had back in 2012 and 13, it's slowly whittled down to virtually nothing. But there's been no mining boom. Mining's been in the background, ticking along, and the price has been good. But there's been no big construction projects, which is generally when the influx of workers and skilled migrants enters the country. So right now, like you said, the vacancy rate's hovering between like 0.5 and 1%. It's up and down quite a bit. I think we're at like 1,500 vacant rental properties, 1,500.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It is. It's a highly competitive rental market and really hard for people to, and that's pushing up rents, which is great for investors, but difficult for people in the rental market. So, we've got escalating rents, which has its pros and cons on both sides. But, I think if you just look at the social housing wait list,
it's huge.
Yeah. And also this undersupply position that we're in right now, that can't be solved in 10 years, I don't think, unless there's this massive investment from government. But right now we just don't have the trades to address it. Yeah,
they've got the money.
Yeah,
it's actually delivery and execution, isn't it? Which is the problem.
That's it. It's not easy.
How do we fix it? There's problems there.
Build to rent. Easy.
We're at the NDIS space. You're also doing a little bit in there as well, aren't you?
Yeah. So part of the work I do for Foundation Housing, I'm on their investment and development committee. We have just recently opened 2 new NDIS homes in Bassendean, and that'd be the smallest project I've done in my career. They're two homes side by side, but it would be the most rewarding project I've done in my career. And we had an existing asset. It was just a simple block in Bassendean that could be divided in two, and we could build 2 side by side green title homes. And we decided to do NDIS homes, but design the 2 homes so that they could interact with one another. So they have a shed. There's no fence between the 2. They have an open courtyard. And
community again.
Yeah, community. And we did with 4x4s. So each bedroom is beautiful and huge and has its own ensuite. And, beautiful shared living areas and 2 separate living areas so that, people can, because they're group homes for highly disabled individuals. And, we've lifted the ceilings up, we addressed the park, and we've put this gorgeous mural down the side of them, and they're just light and bright and just so joyful and beautiful, and just, I hope, will set a new standard for NDIS housing in Australia that will therefore have it in a small way just lift that segment's quality over time, set a new benchmark, and everyone will need to meet that if if they want to deliver that sort of housing. But yeah, it's so wonderful. Like the residents were 4 heavily disabled women who've been living together. They're in their 40s and they've been living together for quite some time in a really unsuitable property in the neighbourhood. And to have those women come and see their new home and just see the smiles on their faces and the smiles on the faces of their families, knowing that their family member was going to be living somewhere that was safe and joyful and just dignified was, one of the highlights of my career for sure.
The smallest project, but also the most rewarding. Hey?
Absolutely, yeah. And look, the big ones are rewarding too, like the teamwork. And, there's one I did in Los Angeles, just with the best construction crew ever. This bunch of guys are just amazing. They're so funny and just an absolute joy to work with. And we had so many laughs, and that was loads of fun. And opening that one was a real kick. And that was huge. That was like 300 apartments in Los Angeles. But yeah, these 2 homes in Bassendean, they still bring a smile to my face.
Beautiful. Just before we leave, Justine, what are your thoughts on HMO and the co-living space and people sharing and living together?
Yeah, I think co-living is a super interesting sub-market and sort of part of the housing continuum, frankly. Like it's a stepping stone, isn't it, through, if you kind of consider the whole housing continuum from crisis accommodation to social housing to affordable housing, somewhere in there between affordable housing and build to rent lies co-living. And it's, because not everyone can afford to rent an apartment on their own, they might prefer to live with friends in a professionally managed environment, in a sort of lower density environment. And I think it's got a lot of legs. I saw it when I was in the States. I saw it start to emerge in San Francisco in like high cost, just bump the microphone, high cost urban centres, where that hurdle to getting even a rental property was just so high. So being able to do co-living where you could, have a well-managed property and just have your own space with your own ensuite but have shared living was just a great way for people to get into the market. And then as their circumstances improve, they may choose to then go into a build-to-rent property, and then they may save up and buy for an apartment and then buy a home and have family. And it's just part of that journey through housing. And I think what the HMO company is doing to address that is first rate.
Thank you.
And I'm not just saying that.
You have to say that because you're here.
Yeah, I do. And I should declare that I'm on an investment committee where we have for Resi Fund, where we are involved in HMO assets. So I will declare that. Yep. But aside from that, I do think you guys are doing a really good job, and I see it evolving into apartment style projects or hotel conversions and all that sort of things. I think it's pretty cool.
Thank you. Justine, it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you. Hopefully we don't need another 12 months.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, for sure. Lovely to see you, Neil.
And you. Thanks again.
Okay.
Join us next week when I have another incredible guest. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you tune in the same time next week so you stay up to date with all the cash flow positive property updates.